Have you ever noticed, the moment you try the hardest to prove your point, is the exact moment people stop listening? You explain clearly. You bring facts. You even correct them calmly. And for a second, it feels powerful. Like you're in control. But then something shifts. The room gets quieter, colder. The energy changes. And somehow, even though you were right, you walk away feeling like you lost something. What if I told you, the real power in conversation isn't in winning, but in knowing when not to fight at all? In this video, you'll learn why arguing silently destroys your influence, what's actually happening inside people during conflict, and how mastering one simple habit can make others respect you without you saying much at all. And if you're someone who wants that kind of quiet control, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be felt, then subscribe now. Because on this channel, Stoic Quiet Strength, we build power, in silence. Most people believe arguments are about truth. It sounds logical. Two people disagree, they exchange ideas, and eventually the stronger reasoning wins. But real life doesn't work like that. Think about the last time you disagreed with someone. Maybe it was something small. A misunderstanding. A simple opinion. At first, it felt harmless. Then something changed. Your tone shifted slightly. Their response became sharper. You stopped asking questions, and started preparing your next point. Not to understand, but to win. And in that moment, the conversation stopped being about truth. It became about something else entirely. Which is pride. Because the truth is, most arguments are not battles of intelligence. They are battles of identity. The moment someone feels dismissed, ignored, or challenged, something deeper takes over. A tightening in the chest. A subtle pause before responding. A shift in tone you can't quite explain. That's not logic. That's ego stepping in. And once ego enters the conversation, logic quietly leaves. People stop listening to understand. They start listening to defend. And here's the part most people never realize. The harder you try to prove your point, the less anyone actually hears you. Because now, it's no longer about what you're saying. It's about how you're making them feel. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." At first, that sounds strange. Why would you choose not to respond, when you know you're right? But look closer. Every argument continues for one simple reason. Someone feels the need to defend. And the moment you step out of that need, something powerful happens. You stop reacting. And you start observing. Instead of jumping in, you begin to notice things most people miss. The tone behind their words. The emotion beneath their argument. The subtle shift in their body language. You begin to see the conversation, instead of being trapped inside it. And that changes everything. Because arguments don't escalate because of words. They escalate because emotion moves faster than reason. The brain doesn't process disagreement as neutral. It processes it as a threat. A threat to intelligence. A threat to status. A threat to identity. So the reaction comes instantly. Before logic even has time to arrive. And once that reaction starts, it builds. Faster voice. Sharper words. Less patience. Until suddenly, you're no longer talking. You're clashing. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance." Wisdom requires something most people avoid. Awareness. The ability to notice what is happening inside you, before you respond. Because without that awareness, every conversation becomes automatic. You react without thinking. You defend without questioning. You speak without choosing. But the moment you slow down, even slightly, a gap appears. A small space between what you hear and how you respond. And inside that space is control. Most people rush past it. But the ones who learn to stay there become very difficult to shake. Because now, instead of reacting to every word, you begin to understand what's really happening. Not just in them, but in you. And once you see that clearly, you stop trying to win conversations. You start mastering them. And that's where the real shift begins. Not in what you say, but in how you choose to engage at all. Once you begin to notice this, something subtle changes. You start seeing patterns. Not just in others, but in yourself. You notice how quickly your mind wants to respond. How it searches for the perfect comeback. How it tries to defend before fully understanding. And for the first time, you don't immediately follow that impulse. You pause. And that pause is where your power begins to grow. Because instead of reacting, you observe. You watch the conversation unfold like an outsider. You notice how the other person speaks, not just what they say. You hear the emotion behind their words. And suddenly, things become clearer. You realize something most people miss. People are not arguing to be right. They are arguing to be heard. Think about it. When someone feels ignored, they push harder. When someone feels misunderstood, they speak louder. When someone feels disrespected, they stop listening entirely. So if you respond with more force, more logic, more correction, you're only feeding the tension. You're speaking to their words, while ignoring their emotions. And emotion is what's really driving the conversation. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They try to win with logic, in an emotional situation. And it never works. Because logic doesn't calm someone who feels unheard. Recognition does. Acknowledgement does. A simple shift changes everything. Instead of responding with, "That's not true," you say something like, "I understand why it might feel that way." Notice the difference. You're not agreeing. You're not surrendering your point. You're simply removing the need for them to defend. And once that need disappears, the tension starts to fade. The conversation softens. For the first time, they're open again. Epictetus once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In arguments, this becomes very clear. It's not just what you say. It's what the other person believes you mean. Disrespect. Dismissal. Rejection. These meanings are created instantly, often without your intention. And once they appear, the argument is no longer about facts. It's about feelings. But when you acknowledge those feelings first, you remove the emotional barrier. And now, something rare happens. The conversation becomes calm again. This is what I call the first shift. From defense, to understanding. But there's a second shift, and it's even more powerful. Instead of defending your position, you become curious. Not fake curiosity. Real curiosity. The kind that slows everything down. When someone challenges you, instead of pushing back. You ask a simple question. Help me understand what you mean. Or, what concerns you most about this? At first, it feels unnatural. Because your instinct wants to respond, to explain, to prove. But when you ask instead, something unexpected happens. The entire structure of the conversation changes. They stop attacking and start explaining. Their energy shifts from confrontation to expression. And now, instead of two people pushing against each other, you have one person opening up and one person calmly listening. That's influence, not force. Seneca once said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." That delay doesn't mean silence forever. It means giving your mind time to catch up with your emotions. Because in most arguments, emotion is always ahead, and reason is always trying to catch up. But when you slow things down, you allow reason to arrive first. And when reason leads the conversation, everything changes. The tone becomes lighter. The tension decreases. And the need to win begins to disappear. But even with this, there's something deeper at play. Something that keeps arguments alive, even when logic is clear. Pride. Because for many people, admitting they're wrong doesn't feel like correcting a mistake. It feels like losing a part of themselves. And that's why arguments continue, long after they should end. Not because the facts are unclear, but because the identity feels threatened. Once someone has taken a position, especially publicly, letting go of it feels like weakness. So they hold on. Even when they know, deep down, they might be wrong. And if you push harder, you only make it worse. Because now, it's not just about the argument. It's about their dignity. And people will protect their dignity, at all costs. This is where most people lose control without realizing it. They try to force truth, instead of creating space for it. But there's a better way. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," you say, "I used to think that too, until I noticed something." That one shift changes everything. Now you're not above them. You're beside them. You're not attacking their view. You're sharing a journey. And that removes the threat. It allows them to reconsider, without feeling defeated. It protects their identity, while opening their mind. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In conversation, this is powerful. Because it reminds you, you don't control what people say, but you do control how you respond. And that response determines everything. At this point, something interesting begins to happen. You're no longer caught in every conversation. You're no longer pulled into every disagreement. You start to see, not every argument deserves your energy. And that realization alone changes how people experience you. Because most people react instantly. They defend quickly. They respond emotionally. They jump into every challenge like it's a test they must pass. But when you don't, when you pause, when you choose carefully, you stand out. Not by being louder, but by being harder to provoke. And that brings us to one of the most misunderstood forms of power, which is silence. Most people think silence means weakness. Like you don't have an answer. Like you've been defeated. But the truth is, silence can carry more control than 100 arguments. Think about it. The moment someone says something that triggers you, and you respond immediately, what just happened? They controlled your reaction. They pushed a button. And you reacted. But when you pause, even for a few seconds, everything changes. The rhythm of the conversation breaks. The tension loses momentum. And suddenly, the other person is left with their own words. And something unexpected happens. They begin to adjust. They soften their tone. They explain themselves more clearly. Sometimes, they even correct themselves. Not because you argued, but because you didn't. That's the quiet power of silence. It creates space. Space for reflection. Space for reason. Space for the conversation to breathe. And in that space, you regain control. Seneca once said, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" Silence protects you from those consequences. It stops emotion from taking over. It prevents words you might regret. It allows clarity to guide your response, instead of impulse. But silence is not just about saying nothing. It's about choosing when to speak. And more importantly, choosing when not to. Because not every situation requires your voice. Some situations require your restraint. And that restraint builds a kind of presence people can feel. You become someone who doesn't react easily. Someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Someone who speaks only when it matters. And because of that, your words begin to carry weight. But here's something even deeper. Silence doesn't just change how others behave. It changes how you feel. When you stop reacting instantly, you break the cycle of emotional escalation. You don't carry the frustration after the conversation ends. You don't replay arguments in your mind. You don't drain your energy trying to prove a point that no one was ready to accept. Instead, you stay calm, centered, in control. Epictetus once said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." In conversation, your reaction is in your power. Not their words. Not their tone. Not their opinion. Just your response. And when you master that, you stop trying to control the conversation. You start controlling yourself. And that's where real strength begins. But even with silence, even with patience, there's something you must accept. Not everyone wants understanding. Some people want conflict. You've met them before. No matter how calm you are, no matter how clearly you explain, they push back. Every point becomes a debate. Every conversation turns into a challenge. And the more you try, the more resistance you get. At that point, it's no longer a discussion. It's a pattern. And the worst thing you can do is keep feeding it. Because some people don't argue to learn. They argue to win. They argue to assert control. They argue because conflict gives them energy. And if you keep engaging, you become part of that cycle. That's why one of the most powerful decisions you can make is to withdraw your energy. Not out of fear. Not out of weakness. But out of awareness. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to respond to every opinion. You don't need to explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand. There is strength in stepping back, in letting go, in choosing peace over unnecessary conflict. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And sometimes, the most truthful thing you can do is say nothing at all. Because silence, in the right moment, speaks clearly enough. It says, "I'm not here to fight. I don't need to prove anything. I choose where my energy goes." And that message is powerful. Because over time, people notice. They notice that you don't react the way others do. They notice that provoking you doesn't work. They notice that you stay calm, even when things get tense. And without you saying a word, your presence begins to shape the conversation. And over time, that presence becomes your identity. People begin to approach you differently. They speak more carefully around you. Not out of fear, but out of respect. They don't come to you for arguments. They come to you for clarity. Because they sense something rare. Stability. A calm that doesn't break under pressure. A mind that doesn't rush to react. And that kind of presence is powerful. Not loud power. Not aggressive power. Quiet power. The kind that influences without force. And this is where the final shift begins. You stop seeing arguments as problems, and start seeing them as mirrors. Every irritation, every moment you feel the urge to respond, becomes a signal pointing inward. Why did that bother you? What part of you felt challenged? What are you trying to protect? Because most reactions are not about the other person. They're about you. Your identity. Your beliefs. Your need to be seen a certain way. And once you start noticing that, something changes. You gain awareness. And awareness creates choice. Instead of reacting automatically, you begin choosing your responses deliberately. You begin asking yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this leading anywhere meaningful? Or am I just trying to prove something? And that question alone stops many arguments before they even begin. Because the truth is, most conflicts don't need resolution. They need restraint. They don't need better arguments. They need better awareness. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And in conversations, this is very real. We imagine disrespect where there is none. We assume intention where there is none. We react to meanings we created in our own minds. And because of that, we turn small moments into unnecessary battles. But when you slow down, when you observe instead of assume, those imagined threats disappear. And so does the need to fight. At this level, conversation becomes something different. It's no longer about proving. It's about understanding. It's no longer about reacting. It's about guiding. And you begin to influence, without trying. Because people feel it. They feel your patience. They feel your control. They feel your lack of need to dominate. And that makes them open. It lowers their guard. It changes the entire atmosphere. Arguments that would normally escalate now dissolve before they grow. Because there is nothing to push against. No resistance. No emotional fuel. Just calm. And calm is contagious. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In conversation, this becomes your advantage. When others raise their voice, you remain steady. When others react emotionally, you remain composed. When others try to provoke, you remain untouched. And in that contrast, you gain control. Not by force, but by difference. This is what most people don't understand. Influence is not about overpowering others. It's about creating an environment where resistance naturally fades, where people begin to think instead of react, where understanding becomes possible again. And the more you practice this, the stronger it becomes. At first, it takes effort. You have to remind yourself to pause, to observe, to hold back. But over time, it becomes natural. It becomes who you are. A person who doesn't get pulled into every conflict. A person who doesn't feel the need to defend every point. A person who understands that not every battle is worth fighting. And because of that, your energy is preserved. Your mind stays clear. Your presence becomes steady. And that steadiness starts to shape everything around you. Relationships improve. Conversations become easier. People respect you without you asking for it. Because they know you are not easily shaken. And in a world where most people react instantly, that alone sets you apart. But there's one final piece to this. One that ties everything together. Because mastering silence is not just about others. It's about you. Because in the end, this isn't really about arguments. It's about control. Not control over people. Control over yourself. The ability to stay calm when challenged. To remain steady when misunderstood. To hold your ground without needing to prove it. That is a rare kind of strength. And once you develop it, everything begins to shift. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing to win every discussion. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening. Instead, you choose your moments. You choose your words. You choose your silence. And in doing so, you protect something most people lose without realizing it. Your energy. Because every argument takes something from you. Your focus. Your peace. Your clarity. And most of the time, it gives nothing back. But when you stop engaging in every conflict, when you step back from unnecessary battles, you begin to reclaim that energy. You become more focused, more intentional, more aware. And that awareness spreads into every part of your life. Decisions become clearer. Emotions become easier to manage. Your mind becomes quieter. And in that quiet, you find strength. Epictetus once said, "There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." In conversation, this is your freedom. You don't need to control what others think. You don't need to control what others say. You don't need to control how others react. You only need to control yourself. And when you do that consistently, something powerful happens. People begin to trust your presence. They listen more carefully when you speak. They value your input because you don't waste it. Your words carry weight. Not because you say a lot, but because you say only what matters. And even more importantly, you become difficult to manipulate, difficult to provoke, difficult to shake. Because you are no longer reacting automatically. You are choosing. Deliberately. Calmly. And that is where true influence lies. Not in dominance. Not in loudness. But in restraint. In clarity. In quiet confidence. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And there is a kind of bravery in silence. The bravery to not respond immediately. The bravery to not defend yourself unnecessarily. The bravery to let go of the need to be seen as right. Because deep down, you already know your value. You don't need to prove it in every conversation. You don't need to argue for it. You don't need to explain it. You simply live it. And people feel it. Over time, this changes how the world interacts with you. Conversations become more respectful. Conflicts become less frequent. And when disagreements do happen, they don't escalate the same way. Because your calm sets the tone. Your presence shapes the interaction. Your silence speaks. And this is the subtle art most people overlook. Never argue. Never defend. Never explain unnecessarily. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you understand when silence is more powerful than words. And once that understanding takes root, life becomes lighter, smoother, more controlled. You are no longer pulled into every emotional wave. You are no longer reacting to every opinion. You are steady, grounded, in control. And that is power in silence. If this message resonated with you, don't just move on. Take it with you. Apply it in your next conversation. Pause before you respond. Observe before you react. Choose silence when it matters. And if you're serious about building this kind of quiet strength, subscribe now to Stoic Quiet Strength. Because every video here is designed to sharpen your mind, steady your emotions, and help you move through life with control, clarity, and purpose.